Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books. And tonight we have, it's a very special night. We're welcoming Ken and Michael and Edward. First time to hear the Srimad-Bhagavatam with us. And thank you for coming. Thank you for being you. So, we read this book every night. It's a very long book, actually. It's 12 cantos long, 18,000 verses. And we're reading it every day. And what it does is it enlightens us gradually to the personal features of the spiritual world and the Supreme Lord and the liberated souls that live in the spiritual world. And that's where we want to be. And this world is imitation of that. And the body we have is an imitation of that. And therefore we're not completely satisfied, no matter what we do, no matter where we are. But when we sit together and hear the Srimad-Bhagavatam, then it brings us together on a spiritual platform, on a devotional spiritual platform, that brings us actually together as a spiritual family. So it's a long story, and you're going to come right in the middle of it, but don't worry, because our spiritual guide, our founder of this movement, my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, he'll explain in every purport of the verses, he'll explain what's going on. So it's not possible to get it all at once, but you'll get something. Okay, before we read the Bhagavatam, we're going to read a prayer, stotra, that glorifies the Srimad-Bhagavatam. And it was written by a devotee named Sanatana Goswami, who was the direct disciple of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the most recent appearance of Krishna on the earth. It's called Srimad-Bhagavatam Mahima Stotram, and by listening carefully to it, it will help us to enter into what we're hearing more deeply. We're going to read the Sanskrit and the English, so don't worry about not knowing the Sanskrit. The English will be clear. It goes like this. Sarvasrabdipi Yusha Sarva Vedaika Satpala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnadya Sarvalokaika Drikprada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavata Prabhu Kalidwan Doditaditya Shri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Shri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshakshadayate Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Shri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Shri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Matsangin Madguro Man Mahadana Man Nistadaga Mad Bhagya Mad Ananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu saduta dayin atinit chochata kada hanamuncha gadachin mam premnarit kantayospuda. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we've reached the 84th chapter of the 10th canto of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, the sages' teachings at Kuruksetra. So the Bhagavatam has 12 cantos, and altogether 335 chapters. And in those 335 chapters, the first 9 cantos gradually explain the creation of the material world, how it all fits together, laws of nature, the history of this universe, the prominent persons, kings and saintly persons, prominent appearances of God and His incarnations and expansions, and how it all fits together. And to prepare us for this canto, the 10th canto, out of 335 chapters, the 10th canto has 90 chapters. And that's about Krishna, who is the original form of the Supreme Lord, the source of all other expansions of God, and the source of all the energies that make up what we see and taste and feel and smell and touch and experience in this material world. So now, during 125 years, Krishna lived here on this planet. And he did many things, but the essence of what he did was to show us practically, physically, what the potencies of the Absolute Truth actually are, what it means to be omnipotent, what it means to be omniscient, what it means to be omnipresent. By his activities and by his interactions with his eternal associates and the conditioned souls, some of whom will come back with him to the spiritual world. That's his purpose of coming. So in that Leela, or pastime, he moves from one place, grows up, moves to another place, but he doesn't age past 16 years old. So now he's 120 some years old at this place, at this point. But he looks like a 16-year-old. And not only does he look like a 16-year-old, he acts like a person with all potencies, all beauty, all strength, all fame, all wealth, all knowledge, and all detachment, all renunciation. He's got all those opulences that make us attractive to one another, more or less, in full. Therefore he's called Krishna, the all-attractive. So at this point of his pastimes, he has come together with other kings and other great sages at a holy place called Kuruksetra, at the event of a solar eclipse. Remember how we had a solar eclipse last year? This is called our conch shell illusion. Please come and enjoy the oil that we're carrying. Buy that new car. The sages' teachings at Kuruksetra. This chapter describes the arrival of great sages at Kuruksetra to observe the auspicious occasion of a solar eclipse. the sage's glorification of Lord Krishna, and Vasudev's enthusiastic performance of sacrifices. On the occasion of a solar eclipse at Kuruksetra, exalted ladies like Kunti, Draupadi, and Subhadra got the chance to associate with Lord Krishna's queens. Seeing how much the Lord's consorts loved their husband, the ladies were struck with wonder. As the women talked among themselves, and the men did likewise, great sages, headed by Narada and Vyasadeva, arrived there, desiring to see Lord Krishna. The various kings and other leading personalities who were sitting at their leisure, including the Pandavas, Krishna, and Balarama, stood up as soon as they saw the sages. The leaders all bowed down to the great souls, inquired about their well-being, and worshipped them by offering them sitting places, water, and so on. Lord Krishna then said, "Now our lives are successful, for we have obtained the goal of life, the audience of great sages and yoga masters, which even demigods only rarely obtain. The water at a holy place of pilgrimage and the deity forms of the gods can purify one only after a long time, but saintly sages purify just by being seen. Those who identify themselves with their bodies and neglect to honor the transcendental sages like you are no better than asses." After hearing Lord Krishna speak these words in the mood of a mere mortal, the sages remained silent for some time, bewildered. Then they said, "How amazing our Lord is! He covers his true identity with human-like activities and pretends to be subject to superior control. Surely he has spoken in this way only to enlighten the general populace. Such behavior of his is indeed inconceivable." The sages continued to glorify the Lord as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supersoul, and the friend and worshipper of the Brahmanas. After the sages had praised him, Lord Krishna offered them his obeisances, and they begged his permission to return to their hermitages. But just then, Vasudeva came forward, bowed to the sages, and asked, "What activities can one perform to be freed from the bondage of fruitive work?" The sages replied, "By worshipping the Supreme Lord Hari through the performance of Vedic sacrifices, you will become free from the bondage of fruitive work." Vasudeva then requested the sages to act as his priests, and he arranged for the Vedic sacrifices to be performed with super excellent paraphernalia. Afterward, Vasudeva presented the priests with valuable gifts of cows and jewelry, and also with marriageable Brahmana girls. He then performed the ritual bath, marking the end of the sacrifice, and fed everyone sumptuously, even the village dogs. Next, he gave ample gifts to his relatives, the various kings and others, who all took Sri Krishna's leave and returned to their own homes. Unable to depart because of his intense affection for his relatives, Nanda Maharaj remained at Kuruksetra for 3 months, served with reverence by the Yadavas. On one occasion, Vasudeva began to describe the deep friendship Nanda had shown him, shedding tears openly. At the end of 3 months, Nanda left for Mathura with the fond farewells of the Yadavas. When the Yadavas finally saw that the rainy season was about to begin, they returned to Dwarka, where they related all that had happened at Kuruksetra to the residents of their capital. That's the summary. Now we're going to read the actual chapter. it comes in verses, and each verse is a Sanskrit verse. And there's the original Devanagari script, which is the sound, the actual sound that emanated from the personalities. Then there's a transliteration, how it looks in our Roman letter system. Then there's the word for word synonyms, which can give faith in the authenticity and authority of the text. And then there's the translation and the commentary or the explanation. So we're just going to read the English translation and the explanation in purport. But you're welcome to come to get these books and read them and get into them. Hare Krishna. Text 1. Shukadeva Goswami said, Prita, Gandhari, Draupadi, Subhadra, the wives of other kings, and the Lord's cowherd girlfriends were all amazed to hear the Queen's deep love for Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the soul of all beings, and their eyes filled with tears. Purport. Draupadi is the chief hearer in this assembly of exalted women. Since as explained by Srila Sridhar Swami, she had been asked the question that Lord Krishna's queens answered by relating their respective stories. Since Gandhari and all the other ladies named here were not even mentioned in the previous chapter as having been present, Acharya Sridhar concludes that they must have heard the queen's narrations, only second-hand. Indeed, Draupadi would never have spoken so freely in the presence of Pritha and Gandhari, her elders, or before the gopis, whose attitude toward the queens of Dwarka was not particularly sympathetic. Even though the gopis joined in shedding tears, it was more because of their being reminded of Krishna's pastimes than because of any loving affinity between them and the queens. We should remember, of course, that there is always perfect harmony on the spiritual platform. Apparent conflict between pure devotees is nothing like mundane envy and strife. The jealousy of the gopis was more show than substance, being exhibited by them as an ecstatic symptom of their overflowing love for Krishna. Srila Sridhar Swami Pad further analyzes the phrase Swagopya as implying that these gopis were the queens, Susarupa, the original prototypes of whom the queens were specific expansions. So the essence of this explanation is that all the things that we see here exist in reality in the spiritual world. There's nothing that can be in existence in this temporary world where all the forms are coming and going that is not originally existing in the spiritual world, which is the prototype. Just like when a man and woman get together, or any species of life, male and female get together, they produce a byproduct, they produce another form, an organic form. And that form resembles the form of the mother and father. Not exactly, but in principle the same. You know, you don't see a dog and a cat getting together and having a giraffe, you know. Yeah. So this is the principle of creation. So because of the total knowledge and the total potency, the total information content of Krishna and the spiritual world, the reflection of the spiritual world, which is the material world, has come into existence. Just like when you look at your form in the mirror, you see a form that looks like you. It's just light rays reflecting off your form into the mirror, but it looks like you. But if you touch it, there's no warmth, there's no life, there's no juice, you know. And if you raise your right hand in the mirror, the left hand raises. It's backwards. You know, they have to write the word ambulance backwards so that the people in the rearview mirror can tell what it is, you know, when it's coming. And when you step away from the mirror, what happens? The form goes away. So this is the principle of reflection. And the material world is a reflection of the spiritual world, which is the reality. When you decorate, you know, your face and look in the mirror, the form in the mirror automatically becomes decorated. So all the forms and all the activities and all the relationships and all the things that go on in this material world are going on because they are originally going on in the spiritual world. So therefore it says here, there's always perfect harmony on the spiritual platform. There's things that look like emotion. There's things that look, and exchanges that look like competition even, or anger even sometimes. But they're not the anger and competition of the material world, because the anger and the competition in the material world result in what? Violence, death. These things don't exist in the spiritual world. So there's all the range of emotions. There's nothing missing, but they're spiritual. And they create an unlimited variety of experience that gives the soul full happiness, full knowledge, eternally. That's where the soul wants to go, and that's who Krishna is. Text 2-5. As the women thus talked among themselves, and the men among themselves, a number of great sages arrived there, all of them eager to see Lord Krishna and Lord Balaram. They included Dvaipayana. Now, don't worry about these names. You'll get to know them after you read the books for a while. But these are very great, liberated sages that stay in different parts of the universe, the higher parts of the universe, and even in this life, in the Himalaya mountains and other regions where there can be secluded. They included Dvaipayana, Narada, Chavana, Devala, and Asita, Vishwamrita, Shatananda, Bharadwaj, and Gotama, Lord Parashuram and his disciples, Vashishta, Galava, Bhrigu, Pulastya, and Kashyapa, Atri, Markandeya, and Brihaspati, Dvita, Trita, Ekata, and the four Kumaras, and Angira, Agastya, Yagyavalkya, and Vamadev. Text 6. As soon as they saw the sages approaching, the kings and other gentlemen who had been seated immediately stood up, including the Pandava brothers, and Krishna and Balaram. They all then bowed down to the sages, who were honored throughout the universe. Text 7. Lord Krishna, Lord Balaram, and the other kings and leaders properly worshipped the sages by offering them words of greeting, sitting places, water for washing their feet, drinking water, flower garlands, incense, and sandalwood paste. After the sages were comfortably seated, the Supreme Lord Krishna, whose transcendental body protects religious principles, addressed them in the midst of that great assembly. Everyone listened silently with rapt attention. The Supreme Lord said, Now our lives are indeed successful, for we have obtained life's ultimate goal, the audience of great yoga masters, which even demigods only rarely obtain. Purport. This is Krishna speaking to these sages and glorifying them. They came to see him. to glorify him. And now they're bewildered. What's going on here? The Supreme Lord of the universe is glorifying us? No, 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 no. Purport. Despite the great privileges the demigods enjoy as administrators of the universe, they rarely see such sages as Narada and Vyasadeva. How much rarer, then, must it be for earthly kings and mere cowherds to see them? Here Lord Krishna, identifying himself with all the kings and others who had assembled at Samanta Panchaka, speaks on their behalf. So these sages, especially Vyasadeva, is mentioned here particularly, is the editor or the author of a body of literature which contains all knowledge. The Veda, the word Veda, means knowledge. Knowledge comes into the universe through the medium of transcendental sound. And that sound contains the information content needed to engineer the creation of the universe. And Lord Brahma is the engineer. And Vishnu provides the ingredients and provides the intelligence and provides the impetus by injecting time and the living beings into the material nature. He's the supreme living being. And he injects all the living beings into the universe that were there from the previous creation, all at once. Therefore, he's the Supreme Father. So, all the literatures that Vyasadeva and the other sages brought into the world, and then specifically Vyasadeva edited them in a way that allowed us in this age, who are not very spiritually inclined and not so strong in memory and good qualities, etc., 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 the capacity to hear and to understand the absolute truth. Particularly, Vyasadeva wrote himself Mahabharata, great history of the greater India, the events leading up to Krishna's appearance, the battle of Kuruksetra, which changed the sovereignty of the earth from demoniac rulership to divine rulership, and then the aftermath. This is called Mahabharata. And contained within the Mahabharata are the essence of all the Puranas, which were also edited by Vyasadeva, and the Vedas, and the Upanishads. And he also wrote the Vedanta Sutra, which is a summary of the Upanishads and the Vedas. And the Mahabharata is the summary of all the Puranas, the histories of the universe. And he still wasn't satisfied. So then Narada, who is the other personality mentioned in this purport, who happens to be the spiritual master of Vyasadeva, he explained to Vyasadeva that in all these literatures, you gave so much knowledge about so many things, but the essence, the goal of it all, you didn't specifically glorify exclusively enough. That's Krishna. So he said, therefore, you should compile a literature which is free from material affinity, which is completely pure, and with no other subject than the absolute truth and how to attain it, and what not to do to attain it, to attain Krishna. And that was the Srimad-Bhagavatam, the book we're reading right now. It is the Summum Bonum of all the Vedic literatures put into one place. And the other book that's basic and fundamental to this movement is the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita, it was spoken by Krishna himself on the battle of Kuruksetra, battlefield of Kuruksetra, just before the battle happened. And he then gives the essence of everything. So here we hear Krishna speaking to these sages. And what is he speaking? basically the Bhagavad Gita. So you can get Krishna's words, you can get the Supreme Lord's words direct from the Bhagavad Gita. And you can get the unpacking of those words by the literary incarnation of Krishna, Vyasadeva. Text 10. How is it that people who were not very austere and who recognized God only in his deity form in the temple can now see you, touch you, inquire from you, bow down to you, worship your feet, and serve you in other ways? Mere bodies of water are not the real sacred places of pilgrimage, nor are mere images of earth and stone the true worshipable deities. These purify one only after a long time, but saintly sages purify one immediately upon being seen. Purport. Because the personality of Godhead is absolute, the Supreme Spirit, any representation of Him, whether manifested in stone, paint, sound, or any other authorized medium, is non-different from His original form in the topmost spiritual planet, Goloka Vrindavan. But ordinary demigods are not absolute, being infinitesimal spirit souls, and thus representations of the demigods are not identical with them. Worship of demigods, or ritual bathing in a sanctified place, gives only limited benefit to those who lack transcendental faith in the Supreme Lord. There's another way of saying this that in the Bible. It says, "Blessed are those who have seen and believe." But even more blessed are those who have not seen and believe. In other words, persons who, with little faith, they need to see some miracle. They need to see something special in front of their eyes before they can go for it, before they can have enough faith to engage in devotional service to Krishna. But persons who are actually spiritual intelligent can hear and can get it by hearing. Therefore, Jesus said, "Let those who have ears hear." So that means deep faith. It means pure hearing, without changing it, without fiddling it with our own limited perception of what it says or what it means. To hear, as these sages are hearing Krishna, is just to hear the sound and accept it for what it is. On the other hand, great Vaishnava saints like Vyasadeva, Narada, and the four Kumaras are always absorbed in Krishna consciousness, and thus they are veritable moving tirthas, places of pilgrimage. Even a moment's association with them, especially by hearing their glorification of the Lord, can deliver one from all material entanglement. As King Yudhishthira said to Vidura, "Bhavad vida bhagavatas tirtha bhutak swayam vibho tirti kurvanti tirtani swantak stenagadabrita." My Lord, devotees like your good self are verily holy places personified, because you carry the Supreme Personality of Godhead within your heart. You turn all places into places of pilgrimage. Bhagavatam 1.3, 113.10. Text 12. This is still Krishna speaking to the sages. Neither the demigods controlling fire, the sun, the moon, and the stars, nor those in charge of earth, water, ether, air, speech, and mind, actually remove the sins of their worshippers who continue to see in terms of dualities. But wise sages destroy one's sins when respectfully served for even a few moments. Purport. An immature devotee of the Supreme Lord may accept only the deity of the Lord as divine and see everything else as material, even the Lord's confidential servants. Nonetheless, because he recognizes Lord Vishnu's supreme position, such a devotee is better situated than materialistic worshippers of the demigods, and he thus deserves a degree of respect. Association with advanced sages, either directly or by hearing their instructions, is recommended in this verse for one who wishes to advance beyond the lowest stages of devotional life. A neophyte devotee may be free from the more obvious sins of violence against innocent creatures and against his own body and mind. But until he becomes very advanced on the devotional path, he must always contend with these subtler contaminations of false pride, disrespect toward respectable Vaishnavas, and lack of compassion for suffering creatures. The best remedy for these symptoms of immaturity is to hear from and honor pure Vaishnavas and to assist them in working to deliver the fallen, conditioned souls. So that's the purpose of the Krishna consciousness movement, to create such persons that by the association, people in general can be uplifted and transported to the spiritual platform. That's the purpose of the Krishna consciousness movement. It has nothing to do with material conceptions. It has nothing to do with just prosperity and all the things that they preach nowadays as the goal of life. We want to know who we are. We want to know where we're going when we leave this body. Without that knowledge, we can't go a step forward in spiritual life. 13. Yasyatma buddhi kunape tridatuke swadi kalatra dishubhauma ijadi yat tirtha buddhi salile nakarichich janeshu abhigeshu saeva gokaraha. One who identifies his self as the inert body composed of mucus, bile, air, who assumes his wife and family as permanently his own, who thinks an earthen image or the land of his birth as worshipable, or who sees a place of pilgrimage as merely the water there, but who never identifies himself with, feels kinship with, worships, or even visits those who are wise in spiritual truth. Such a person is no better than a cow or an ass. Purport. True intelligence is shown by one's freedom from false identification of the self. As stated in the Brihaspati Samhita, Agyata Bhagavad Dharma Mantra Vijnana Sangvidaha Naraste Go Karagyeya Apibu Pala Banditaha. Men who do not know the principles of devotional service to the Supreme Lord should be known as cows and asses, even if they are expert in technically analyzing Vedic mantras and are adored as world leaders. An imperfect Vaishnava, advancing toward the second-class platform, identifies himself with the sages who have established the true spiritual path, even while he still may have some inferior material attachments to body, family, and so on. Such a devotee of the Lord is not a foolish cow or stubborn ass, like the majority of materialists. But most excellent is the Vaishnava who has gained the special mercy of the Lord and broken free from the bondage of illusory attachments altogether. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti, the words Bauma Ijadi, who thinks an image made of earth is worshipable, refer not to the deity form of the Supreme Lord in his temple, but to deities of demigods. And the words Yatir the Buddhi Salile, who see a place of pilgrimage as merely the water there, refer not to sacred rivers like the Ganges or Yamuna, but to lesser rivers. And also the place of one's birth. If one worships the place of one's birth, that's what nationalism is all about. Same. Ass. Animal. Bark, bark, bark. You can't come into this neighborhood. What are you doing here? Text 14. Shukadeva Goswami said, hearing such unfathomable words from the unlimitedly wise Lord Krishna, the learned Brahmanas remained silent, their minds bewildered. Text 15. For some time, the sages pondered the Supreme Lord's behavior, which resembled that of a subordinate living being. They concluded that he was acting this way to instruct the people in general. Thus they smiled and spoke to him, the spiritual master of the universe. Purport. Srila Sridhar Swami explains the word Ishitavyata as referring to one's not being a controller, or in other words, to being under the law of karma, obliged to work and experience the results of one's own work. While addressing the sages, Lord Krishna accepted the role of a subordinate living being to emphasize the importance of hearing and serving saintly Vaishnavas. The personality of Godhead is also the supreme teacher of spiritual surrender. Text 16. The great sages said, your power of illusion has totally bewildered us. The most exalted knowers of the truth and the leaders among the universal creators. Ah, how amazing is the behavior of the Supreme Lord. He covers himself with his human-like activities and pretends to be a subject to superior control. Purport. The sages have characterized the Lord's statements as inscrutable, duranvayam. How this is so is stated here. His words and activities bewilder even the most learned when he plays at subordinating himself to his own servants. Text 17. Indeed, the human-like pastimes of the Almighty are simply a pretense. Effortlessly, he alone sends forth from his self this variegated creation, maintains it, and then swallows it up again, all without becoming entangled, just as the element earth takes on many names and forms in its various transformations. Purport. The One Supreme expands himself as many without diminishing his completeness. He does this effortlessly, without depending on anyone or anything else. This mystic process of the Lord's self-expansion is incomprehensible to all but himself. But the example of the substance earth and its manifold products bears enough resemblance to provide some idea. The same example is also presented in an often cited passage of the Chandogya Upanishad 6.1.4. Vacharam vanam vikaro namedyayam mritiketjeva satyam. Earth's transformations are merely verbal creations of the process of naming. The substance earth itself alone real. Srila Sridhar Swami suggests that this verse of Srimad-Bhagavatam answers a possible objection on the part of Lord Krishna. How can I create, maintain, and destroy the universe if I am Vasudev's son? The answer is given by the words, Aho vibhum nash charitam vidambanam. You are the perfectly complete whole, and your birth and pastimes are only an imitation of ordinary person's activities in the material world. You simply pretend to be under higher control. 18. So the purpose of the Bhagavatam, Gita, is to reveal to the world this fact. And Krishna comes here and he acts like an ordinary human being, but sometimes he does things that no human being can do at the same time, and establishes the potency of the absolute truth. He marries 16,000 queens and maintains each one of them in a separate palace and associates with all of them at the same time by expanding himself in 16,000 forms. That's history, man. That's history. It's not a myth. But there's a class of scholar and a class of so-called learned person in this planet right now who thinks that that's a myth. And therefore they have lost their capacity to understand what all-powerful means. And therefore they've what's the word, settled for an impersonal concept of God. Why? Because they don't want to be responsible to anyone. And if they accept that there's a personal God, then they're responsible for somebody. And they don't, no. And then they do what they want. They say it's all Maya, but they're very expert at enjoying the Maya. Nonetheless, at suitable times, you assume the pure mode of goodness to protect your devotees and punish the wicked. Thus you, the soul of the Varnashrama order, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, maintain the eternal path of the Vedas by enjoying your pleasure pastimes. Text 19. The Vedas are your spotless heart, and through them one can perceive, by means of austerity, study, and self-control, the manifest, the unmanifest, and the pure existence.
There's a purport.
Purport? Oh, sorry. Purport. This verse describes, let me read the verse again. So nice. Nonetheless, at suitable times, you assume the pure mode of goodness to protect your devotees and punish the wicked. Thus you, the soul of the Varnashrama social order, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, maintain the eternal path of the Vedas by enjoying your pleasure pastimes. Purport. This verse describes the Lord's enlightening people in general, jana sangraha, and its imitation of worldly behavior. Because the personality of Godhead remains always perfect, the body he manifests when he comes down to this world is not touched by material goodness. Rather, it is a manifestation of the pure goodness known as Vishuddhasattva, the same spiritual substance that constitutes his original form. Text 19. The Vedas are your spotless heart, and through them one can perceive, by means of austerity, study, and self-control, the manifest, the unmanifest, and the pure existence transcendental to both. Purport. Vyakta, the unmanifest, consists of the visible things of this world, and avyakta consists of the subtle, underlying causes of cosmic creation. The Vedas point toward the transcendental realm of Brahman, which lies beyond all material cause and effect. 20. Therefore, O Supreme Brahman, you honor the members of the Brahminical community, for they are the perfect agents by which one can realize you through the evidence of the Vedas. For that very reason, you are the foremost worshipper of the Brahmanas. 21. Today, our birth, education, austerity, and vision have all become perfect because we have been able to associate with you, the goal of all saintly persons. Indeed, you yourself are the ultimate, supreme blessing. Purport. The sages here contrast their respect for the Lord with his reciprocal worship of them. Lord Krishna honors Brahmanas as a means of instructing less intelligent men, whereas he is in fact absolutely independent. The Brahmanas who worship him, on the other hand, benefit themselves more than they can imagine. 22. Let us offer our obeisances unto that Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, the infinitely intelligent Supersoul, who has disguised his greatness through his mystic Yogamaya. Purport. Apart from any future profit to be obtained from worshipping the Supreme Lord, it is every person's most essential obligation to bow down to him as an acknowledgement of one's dependence and servitude. Lord Krishna recommends Manmana Bhava Madbhakto Madhyaji Mam Namaskuru Mamivaishyasi Satyam Te Atmanam Mamivaishyasi Yuktvaivam Atmanam Matpadayanaha. Engage your mind always in thinking of me. Become my devotee. Offer obeisances to me and worship me. Being completely absorbed in me, surely you will come to me. Bhagavad Gita 9:34. 23. Neither these kings, nor even the Vrishnis who enjoy your intimate association, know you as the soul of all existence, the force of time, and the supreme controller. For them you are covered by the curtain of Maya. Purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti explains that Lord Krishna's family, the Vrishnis, were too familiar with him to realize that he is the super soul residing in the heart of every created being. And those kings at Kuruksetra, who were not devotees of Krishna, could not recognize him as time, the annihilator of everything. Devotees and non-devotees are both covered by Maya, but in different ways. For the materialists, Maya is illusion, but for the Vaishnavas, she acts as Yogamaya, the internal potency who covers their awareness of the Supreme Lord's majesty and engages them in his eternal pleasure pastimes. 24 and 25. A sleeping person imagines an alternative reality for himself, and seeing himself as having various names and forms, forgets his waking identity, which is distinct from the dream. I think I'll read that again, with permission. Permission. A sleeping person imagines an alternative reality for himself, and seeing himself as having various names and forms, forgets his waking identity, which is distinct from the dream. Similarly, the senses of one whose consciousness is bewildered by illusion perceive only the names and forms of material objects. Thus, such a person loses his memory and cannot know you. Purport, speak truth to power.
Right.
Purport. Just as a person's dream is a secondary reality created from the stock of his memories and desires, so this universe exists as the inferior creation of the Supreme Lord, in no way separate from Him. And just as the person who awakens from sleep experiences the higher reality of his waking life, so the Supreme Lord also has His distinct higher reality beyond everything we know of this world. In His own words, Maya tatamidang sarvam jagat avyakta murtina matstani sarvabhutani nachaham te shravastitaha nachamat stani bhutani pashyame yogamaishwaram bhuta brinnacha bhutasto mamatma bhuta bhavanaha. By me and my unmanifested form, this entire universe is pervaded. All beings are in me, but I am not in them. And yet everything that is created does not rest in me. Behold my mystic opulence. Although I am the maintainer of all living entities, and although I am everything, I am not part of this cosmic manifestation, for my very self is the very source of creation. Now, if you can find a definition of God that can equal that, I'll eat it. Text 26. Today we have directly seen your feet, the source of the holy Ganges, which washes away volumes of sins. Perfected yogis can at best meditate. Don't worry, it's okay. Don't worry, just don't worry. It'll be okay, no problem. Today we have directly seen your feet, the source of the holy Ganges, which washes away volumes of sins. Perfected yogis can at best meditate upon your feet within their hearts. But only those who render you wholehearted devotional service, and in this way vanquish the soul's covering, the material mind, attain you as their final destination. Therefore, kindly show mercy to us, your devotees. How beautiful is that? Purport. The holy river Ganges has the power to destroy all sorts of sinful reactions, because she originates at the Lord's lotus feet, and thus contains the dust of His feet. Explaining this verse, Sridhar Swami says, if the Lord might advise the sages that they need not concern themselves with devotional practices because they are already far advanced in spiritual knowledge and austerity, they hereby respectfully decline such a suggestion, pointing out that only those yogis who have destroyed their material mind and ego by surrendering to Krishna in pure devotional service can attain full perfection. They conclude by praying to the Lord that He favor them in the most merciful way by making them His devotees. Hare Krishna. So we'll stop there, reading there. You got a blast, a little burst of spiritual knowledge and energy there. So now we'll have a little short session of open mic. Anything that you heard that's stuck in your mind that you want to reflect on yourself or discuss deeper or question or whatever. The ball is in your court. Yes, Mike.
So Maharaj, one of the point you made about the impersonalist
they are, an excuse not to be, accountable or responsible for someone higher authority. That's why they accept that impersonal aspect and move on, which I really like that explanation that I haven't heard before. So just wanted to thank you for that.
Well, thank you for that. And it's extremely important, isn't it? Because that impersonal philosophy is now rampant. It's all pervasive everywhere. You go in any church, any place, you start yoga center, you start to talk about God being a person. No, he's energy. He's, and it all gives them the excuse of being able to sit there together naked in a hot, whatever, room and look at each other when they do yoga postures. And they're thinking, this is, and the guy's thinking the guy's teaching them it's okay. And their minds are completely bewildered. And that's the root of it. I mean, it sounds gross, it sounds outlandish, but it sounds outlandish only because so many people are doing it, and less intelligent people just follow like lemmings. There's that idea of lemmings. The one lemming jumps off the cliff and all the other lemons just jump off to follow. Be bold. Careful.
Sorry.
Careful. That's okay. So actually it's a root. It's at the root of the misconception that keeps us in this material world.
Yeah.
It's so profound, and yet it's so simple. And therefore the sages were so bewildered because they came to bow down before Krishna, and Krishna, what did he do? He bowed down to them. And he said, wait, no, that's not. And they became completely confused because the absolute truth becomes the follower of his pure devotee. The love of a pure devotee actually controls God. And that, the pure devotee can't understand that and can't accept it, but it's true, nonetheless. Yes?
We just did this section, this was the previous chapter in the Bhagavatam class in the temple. So I gave class on some of those verses. And I was looking at some of our Acharya's commentaries, specifically on those verses when the sages were bewildered. And it says that, some of the sages, actually in that long list, not all of them are perfect bhaktas. Some of them are Gyan Mishra and whatnot. So some of them were completely, either Jiva Goswami or Vishwanath was saying how some of them were bewildered and they were thinking, did we get the right guy here? Is this actually the absolute truth? Is this Krishna?
Exactly.
Is this him? And then the other ones, they all kind of were discussing, he just does this as an example, and then everyone was enlightened, and then they took turns speaking. So I thought that was interesting.
Thank you. That was very nice.
And I had another reflection. I really liked your description of how the material world is a reflection of the spiritual world. I thought that was really a nice way to put it. About in the mirror, we look at our body, and it's the same. There's nothing that's in the mirror, in the reflection, that's not in the reality.
Exactly.
But when you touch the mirror, it's just cold glass. There's no substance, actually.
That's right. And it goes away as soon as you step away from it.
And how you said it, you raise the right hand and the left hand goes up. So it's just the opposite. The highest thing in the spiritual world is the lowest thing here.
Exactly.
Vice versa. And so
exactly.
I thought that was a really nice way to explain it.
And there's a further explanation of this in the Bhagavatam, which I'm praying that everyone will read, that describes it as an amalgamation. It's a reflection, but it's more than a reflection. It's an amalgamation. And it's not that Krishna loses his own identity and just merges into the thing, and he's no longer there. That's what that verse was about, that was quoted. He's everywhere by his energies, but he remains aloof. Just like the sun is in one place in the sky, but it's spreading light and heat all through the universe. So in the same way, the absolute truth is in one place in the spiritual world, and emanates the spiritual world, and emanates the material world. And at the same time, he's aloof from it. He looks like it's it. He looks like he's it. And in a sense he is, because the energy is transformed from his energy. But he's not transformed. And that's the Mayavad conception. The Mayavad conception is that when that energy is transformed, he no longer exists. And therefore the ultimate is just an amorphous energy field, and how that comes into form and how the variety comes out of nothing, they can't explain. They cannot explain it. All they can say is it's illusion. They say, no, you can't understand it, and therefore we don't talk about it. But they write books and books and books and books about how you can't talk about it and how you don't need books. But at least, we're straightforward. No, we do need books, and we do need to understand these things. And if you don't, you're in Maya. Or what does it say? You're an ass or a cow. You want to get out of animal life? Come on, let's go. Get out of animal life. You can't do more than just eat and sleep and have sex and die. And defend yourself in the meantime. Okay, I think I got to go now because something's happening somewhere else, and I think someone wants to take somewhere else. So we're gonna stop here. Thank you very much. I'm watching carefully. I've been doing this for 47 years, and I watch carefully, and I can tell who's hearing. Thank you. And thank you. Hare Krishna. And thank you. Anything from cyberspace? No. Okay. Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. Samaveta Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. See you tomorrow at 4:30 in the afternoon. Same place, same station. Radha Lane. In the live studios. The spiritual world. Hare Krishna. Hare Bol.